An elderly woman living in the Colorado mountains thought she rescued a tiny black kitten lost in a snowstorm. But within weeks, the little creature grew too fast, never meowed, and reacted strangely to the distant roars echoing from the forest behind her home. And the moment the wildlife doctor looked into the carrier and turned pale, she finally understood the terrifying truth. The animal she saved was never a cat. The late autumn wind swept down from the Colorado Rockies in long, aching breaths, rattling the dry pine needles against the window of Evelyn Carter's tiny wooden cabin. At 68, she had grown used to the silence of this mountain town, used to nights where the only company was the hum of her old heater and the distant whistle of freight trains cutting through the valley. Loneliness didn't frighten her anymore. It was simply part of the landscape, like granite cliffs or the smell of cedar smoke drifting from chimneys. But that evening, as she walked slowly down the gravel path toward her mailbox, something broke the stillness. A thin, trembling sound, almost a cry. She froze. The sun had slipped behind the ridge, leaving the road in a blue-gray wash, the kind of lighting where every shadow felt deeper than it should. Evelyn took another cautious step. The wind carried the noise again, softer this time, like a weak scratch mixed with a whimper. There, half hidden beneath the rusted metal grate of a storm drain, was a small bundle of black fur. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered. The creature was soaked from the earlier rain, its tiny body shivering uncontrollably. When she knelt down, its eyes snapped open, round, blazing gold, startling in a way that made her inhale sharply. Not the warm amber of a house cat, not the soft green of a kitten. These eyes were too sharp, too alert, like something watching the world rather than pleading with it. "It's okay. You're safe," she murmured, reaching out. The creature didn't hiss. It didn't meow. Instead, it released a strange low rumble, almost a miniature growl, so faint she wondered if she imagined it. Still, when she slid her hands beneath its frail body, it clung desperately to her sweater, burying its face against the fabric as though recognizing warmth for the first time. Evelyn felt her heart twist. It had been years since anything needed her. She wrapped the small creature inside her wool scarf and hurried back toward her cabin. Behind her, Mr. Harris, her neighbor across the road, opened his porch door. "You all right out there?" he called. "Careful walking around after dark. Clark said they found strange tracks by the tree line again." Evelyn waved him off gently. "Just a lost little kitten tonight." Harris squinted at the bundle in her arms. "That ain't a kitten I've seen before. Eyes on that thing look like wildfire." She laughed it off, though a tiny chill ran between her shoulder blades. Probably just scared. Inside her cabin, the warmth wrapped around them both. She dried the little animal with a soft towel and placed it by the fireplace, the flames glowing orange across its soaked black fur. Up close, it looked different. Its legs seemed longer than a normal kitten's, its paws wider, the pads thick and dark like charcoal. When she offered a dish of warm milk, it ignored it completely, choosing instead to stare at the fire as though reading something in the flicker of the flames. "What a strange little shadow you are," she whispered. Shadow? Yes. Fitting. She lifted him gently and settled into her old rocking chair, letting the fire crackle while Shadow pressed his head beneath her chin. His fur smelled faintly wild, like mud, pine, and cold stone. Yet he trembled with such fear that she drew the blanket tighter around them both. "You're safe here," she said softly, as if giving a promise she didn't yet understand. Outside, the wind rose again. Somewhere in the distance, a lone animal let out a sharp cry, high, echoing, and unmistakably wild. Evelyn stiffened, her hand automatically stroking the trembling creature in her lap. She had lived here long enough to recognize the sound of a mountain predator. Mountain lions rarely came this close to the neighborhood, not unless pushed by hunger or separated from their young. Shadow twitched at the noise, his small body going rigid. "It's all right," she whispered quickly. "Nothing's going to hurt you." But even as she said it, she knew the night around her cabin felt different, charged, watchful, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Shadow curled tighter against her chest, releasing that quiet, rumbling sound again. Not a purr, not exactly. More like something ancient trying to remember softness. Evelyn hugged him closer. She didn't see the set of wide, fresh paw prints just beyond the porch, or the way they circled her cabin once before disappearing back into the trees. For now, she only felt the weight of a small, shaking kitten in her arms, one she believed she had rescued. And somewhere deep inside the forest, something much larger let out a second, mournful cry. "Don't worry, Shadow," she whispered into his damp fur, rocking slowly as sparks drifted upward in the fireplace glow. "You're home now." Little did she know, nothing about the creature she held was what she thought it was. And saving his life would soon unravel everything she believed about safety, family, and the wild world outside her door. Morning arrived slowly in the mountains, with a pale gold light spilling across the valley and brushing the tops of the pines outside Evelyn's cabin. She woke stiffly in her rocking chair. Shadow curled beneath her chin, his small black body warm and surprisingly heavy. For a moment, she simply listened to the crackle of the dying fire and the gentle rhythm of his breathing. It felt peaceful, almost like the mornings she used to share with her late husband before illness took him. The quiet always reminded her of the importance of home insurance and how fragile life could be, though she never said such thoughts out loud. But today, the peace didn't hold. Shadow stretched, and as he unfolded his limbs, Evelyn felt a shift beneath her palms. Longer legs, broader paws than she remembered. She blinked, wondering if her eyes were playing tricks on her. But the truth sat right in her lap. He was growing too fast, faster than any kitten she had ever raised. She set him gently on the rug, expecting him to wobble like the tiny creature she found last night. Instead, he moved with a strange, low grace, his belly barely skimming the floor, his shoulders rolling beneath his dark fur as if built for stealth. He crept toward the window, tail straight, ears sharp and alert. "Curious little thing, aren't you?" she murmured. Shadow didn't answer with a meow. He made that same quiet, rasping sound, like something caught between a sigh and a growl. His golden eyes fixed on the forest line outside the glass, unblinking. Evelyn followed his gaze. Snow from last night's storm still clung to the earth in broken patches. And there, pressed clearly in the soft dirt near her porch, were fresh tracks. Large, round, too big for a dog, too defined for a stray. She moved closer to the window, her heart thumping with a memory she didn't want to revisit. The wildlife pamphlet that warned residents about predators returning closer to town during the colder months. She'd always trusted the forest. It had been her refuge when grief hollowed her out years ago, when she needed space, quiet, and the feeling of something constant in a world that loved to shift. But the sight of those prints made the hairs on her arms stand up. "Someone's been visiting," she whispered. Shadow pressed his tiny, yet oddly wide paw to the window pane. When another distant cry echoed from the tree line, he stiffened. The sound was clearer than last night, a long, sawing call carried by the wind. Evelyn didn't want to believe she recognized it, but she did. A mountain lion. She stepped back, uneasy, but Shadow didn't flinch. If anything, he seemed to lean closer, as if drawn to the sound, with an instinct older than the cabin itself. "You're just scared," she told him, mostly to comfort herself. Storms send all sorts of creatures wandering. Still, the prints outside her porch were fresh, too fresh to ignore. And Shadow's reaction wasn't fear at all. It was recognition. Later that afternoon, she bundled up, slipped on her boots, and stepped outside to fetch firewood, Shadow watching her from the doorway like a sentry. The cold bit into her cheeks, and the air smelled crisp, the kind of clean that made her lungs ache. She knelt near the tracks again, brushing loose pine needles aside, studying them the way her husband used to study financial paperwork. Carefully, cautiously, as though missing one detail could cost everything. Large paths, deep impressions, leading toward the road, circling her cabin, then disappearing into the pines. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. A rustle behind her made her start. But it was only little Mia from across the street, her bright pink jacket standing out against the muted forest backdrop. "Miss Evelyn, did you find that kitten again?" the girl asked, bouncing on her toes. Evelyn managed a smile. "He's inside by the fire. I named him Shadow." Mia giggled. "That's a cool name. Can I see him later?" "We'll see, dear. He's still very weak." But even as she spoke, she wondered, had she really brought home a kitten? Or had she taken in something she didn't understand? That evening, while the ridge darkened to blue and the temperature dropped, Shadow began pacing the length of the living room. His movements were low, silent, nearly predatory. He stopped only when he reached the window again, staring so intently outside that Evelyn felt a chill seep into the room. "I know something scared you out there," she said gently, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to Shadow or herself. "But you're safe now." Shadow tilted his head, not with the clumsy curiosity of a kitten, but with the focused attention of an animal trying to learn the rules of a new den. She tried distracting him with a small toy mouse, but he didn't bat at it or chase it. Instead, he stalked it, lowering his body and inching forward with an eerie stillness, then pounced so fast the toy skidded across the room. Evelyn jumped. "That's quite a leap for your size," she whispered. This time, when Shadow looked up at her, there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite name. Something wild, something old, something that didn't belong in a home warmed by a fireplace and protected by basic home insurance and porch lights. Later that night, Shadow climbed effortlessly atop the old bookshelf, perching on the highest point in the room. He watched her every movement with patient alertness. As she sat back in her rocking chair, she felt more observed than accompanied. But then he climbed down, pressed his small body against her leg, and released a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Not a cat's purr. Something deeper. She stroked his back slowly. "Shadow, what are you?" Another cry echoed from the woods. Shadow didn't tremble this time. Evelyn did. Snow drifted in thin, nervous flakes the morning Evelyn decided Shadow needed help. His limp had grown more noticeable overnight. Every few steps, his back leg buckled slightly, and he'd pause as if embarrassed by his own weakness. She'd raised enough animals in her life to know when something wasn't right. Even so, she hesitated before loading him into the carrier she dusted off from her attic. Shadow didn't belong in small spaces. She already sensed that. But his injury left her no choice. The short drive to the Rocky Ridge Wildlife Clinic felt longer than usual. The road wound through tall pines, the kind that moaned when the wind hit them sideways. Every so often, Shadow let out a soft, throaty rumble from the carrier, a sound that tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She glanced down once, just once, and the way his golden eyes glowed back through the mesh made her heart stutter. "It's just a checkup," she whispered. "You'll be all right, sweetheart." When she pushed open the clinic door, a warm gust of heated air hit her face. The lobby was small, lined with posters about responsible wildlife encounters and pet insurance options pinned carelessly on a board near the desk. A golden retriever in the corner lifted its head, sniffed twice, then whimpered and crawled behind its owner's legs. Evelyn frowned. She'd never seen a dog react that fast. The receptionist offered a polite smile, but it faltered as soon as she peered into the carrier. Her eyebrows pinched together, and she stood a little straighter. "What exactly is your pet, ma'am?" "A kitten," Evelyn answered, trying to steady her voice. "I found him after the storm." The woman exchanged a quick look with the veterinary tech behind her. Something tense, sharp, a flicker of alarm Evelyn couldn't quite place. "I'll call Dr. Rowan," the receptionist murmured. Moments later, the tall, gray-bearded wildlife specialist stepped into the room. He was the type of man who carried authority without raising his voice. Someone who had spent decades treating creatures that weren't meant for living rooms or warm fireplaces. He nodded at Evelyn kindly, but when he leaned toward the carrier, his entire body stiffened. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I'm going to need you to step back. Don't open that door, not even an inch." Evelyn blinked. "He's frightened, that's all. And his leg..." "No." Dr. Rowan held up a hand. "This isn't a domestic animal." The room felt suddenly smaller, colder. Even the air seemed to settle differently, as though it understood something she didn't. "Shadow is my kitten," she insisted softly. "I've been caring for him for weeks." "Please," Rowan said gently. "Let's take him to the exam room. Carefully." Two techs moved in with thick gloves and a reinforced cart, their expressions tense. Shadow let out a low, warning growl, not loud but so deep the wheels of the cart rattled on the floor. Evelyn reached instinctively toward the carrier, and Rowan caught her arm gently. "He's not angry with you," the doctor said. "He's trying to protect you." Inside the exam room, they secured the carrier behind a plexiglass shield. Rowan crouched, studying the creature inside with the kind of reverence people reserve for rare art or dangerous miracles. Shadow didn't retreat. He stared straight back at the doctor, unflinching. Rowan exhaled slowly. "I haven't seen one of these in years." "One of what?" Evelyn whispered. He removed his glasses, rubbing them against his coat with a heavy sigh, as though preparing for a truth he'd hoped not to speak today. "Mrs. Carter, Shadow is not a cat," he said softly. "He's a mountain lion cub, and not just any cub. He appears to be melanistic, which explains the black coat. It's incredibly rare." The words hit her like cold water. Her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. "No," she whispered. "Mountain lions don't look like this." He was tiny. "Cubs can be small when separated too early," Rowan answered. "His leg injury may have come from surviving alone longer than he should have. But the paws, the bone structure, the jawline, it's all there. And those sounds he makes, that's no purr. That's a juvenile, territorial rumble." Evelyn backed up until she felt the wall press against her spine. "He's just a baby," she said, her voice cracking. "He needed warmth. I gave him a home." Rowan softened. I don't doubt that you saved him. Truly. But this, he gestured at the carrier, is a wild predator. And as he grows, he will become powerful, much stronger than you. Strong enough to hurt you, even without meaning to. The thought made her knees wobble. What happens now? She whispered. We'll have to inform wildlife enforcement, Rowan answered. By law, you cannot keep a mountain lion in a residential home. It poses significant risk. Risk. Enforcement. Violation. Words that felt as heavy as the mountains themselves. Her chest tightened as she imagined officers arriving at her cabin, taking Shadow away. She pictured him alone, locked in a concrete enclosure, confused and terrified, thinking she'd abandoned him. She thought of the lonely nights she'd survived recently. The quiet crackling of her fireplace, the ache of aging bones, the fear of medical bills or accident attorneys should anything go wrong in these remote woods. And how Shadow had filled something empty in her life she didn't know still needed filling. He trusts me, she whispered hoarsely. If you take him, he'll think I left him. Rowan's expression softened in a way that surprised her. I believe he's imprinted on you. But that doesn't change the law or the safety concerns. The text shifted uncomfortably. The clinic felt unbearably silent, just the faint hum of the heater and the distant tapping of frozen branches on the window. Rowan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Carter, please understand. Your heart was in the right place. But this little one, his future won't be simple. Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice cracking as she leaned toward the carrier. Shadow met her gaze with unwavering intensity, pressing his wide paw to the metal grate. And in that moment, terrifying, impossible, undeniable, she realized he wasn't asking for help. He was asking not to be left behind. The drive home from the mountain clinic felt like a dream Evelyn couldn't wake from. Snow blurred across the windshield in long white streaks, but she barely saw the road. Shadow sat in the reinforced carrier beside her, silent now, watching her with those impossibly bright eyes. Not a kitten's eyes, not anymore. The truth Dr. Rowan had spoken still echoed through her chest like a slow, heavy heartbeat. A mountain lion cub, melanistic, rare, wild, illegal to keep, impossible to release. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She'd lived through loss, through the slow and painful unwinding of her husband's illness, through the lonely years that followed. But this strange bond growing between her and a creature she never should have brought home, felt like a test she didn't know how to take. When she pulled into her driveway, 2 trucks were already waiting. Wildlife enforcement. Her stomach dropped. Deputy Clark stepped out first, the younger officer she'd only seen in passing around town. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who carried himself stiffly, like someone who'd known danger too intimately. Snow clung to the brim of his hat as he approached her truck. Mrs. Carter, he called. We need to speak with you. She swallowed hard. Please, let me bring him inside first. He's scared. Before he could reply, Dr. Rowan stepped out of his own vehicle parked behind them. He raised a hand toward Clark. Let her get settled, he said quietly. This isn't a criminal situation. It's a rescue that took a complicated turn. Clark didn't look convinced, but he stepped aside. Inside the cabin, Evelyn set the carrier by the hearth. Shadow pushed his face against the bars, rumbling low when he saw the officers through the window. The wildness in his eyes felt suddenly more visible, as if the world outside had exposed something he had been hiding. Clark followed Rowan in, removing his hat politely as he stepped over the threshold. Mrs. Carter, he began, his tone clipped but not unkind. By state law, possession of a mountain lion, young or otherwise, is prohibited without a Class II wildlife custodian license. Evelyn sat down slowly, gripping the arms of her rocking chair. I didn't know what he was. I thought I was saving a kitten. No one is accusing you of wrongdoing, Rowan said gently, but the situation is dangerous, for you and for him. Clark glanced at the carrier. Shadow let out a soft growl. Clark's jaw tightened. That's not a house pet, he said. That's a predator. And from the size of those paws, he'll be a big one. Evelyn's heart squeezed. He's just a baby. He's afraid. Fear doesn't make him less lethal, Clark replied. And there was something in his voice, a tremor, maybe pain, that told her this wasn't just policy to him. It was personal. Rowan stepped closer to the carrier. I understand the bond you formed. Imprinting can happen quickly, especially in an orphaned cub. But Shadow cannot survive in a home. And if released into the wild, he won't last a week. Clark nodded curtly. There's been a large mountain lion roaming close to town lately. We believe it's looking for a missing cub. That means more predators near homes, more danger. A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. The cries she'd heard at night, the tracks circling her porch, the strange way shadows stiffened when they echoed through the valley. Is that his mother? She whispered. Possibly, Rowan said. But even if she is, returning him to her isn't safe. Cubs separated too long don't reintegrate easily. And a desperate adult lion near residences creates another risk. Clark cleared his throat. We have two options. One, Shadow is transferred to a wildlife holding facility until placement becomes available in a sanctuary. Evelyn imagined cold concrete floors, metal bars, the smell of fear, the confusion in Shadow's eyes when she didn't come back. Her chest tightened painfully. And the second? She asked. You apply for a wildlife custodian license, Rowan said, lowering his voice, and build a legal enclosure that meets state requirements. But it's expensive, complicated. You'd need materials, land modifications, inspections. He hesitated, and it must be completed quickly. Clark crossed his arms. We can't allow a growing mountain lion to remain unsecured in a residence. If the enclosure isn't started immediately, we'll be forced to remove him for public safety. Shadow pressed both paws against the metal grate, rumbling softly. His golden eyes locked onto hers, pleading, fearful, trusting in a way that tore at her heart. He thinks I'm his mother, she whispered. He thinks you're his only safety, Rowan corrected. But love doesn't override instinct. When he matures, he will be stronger than any grown man. And if he hurts you, accidentally or otherwise, there would be no coming back from that. The fire crackled softly, the only sound in the room as Evelyn tried to steady her breathing. Her mind swirled through every fear of growing old, medical bills, not being able to protect herself, relying on life insurance paperwork instead of family. And now here she was, standing between the law and a creature who needed her. How long do I have? She asked quietly. Clark exchanged a look with Rowan. 10 days, he said. 10 days, she repeated, stunned. If there's no enclosure being built by then, Clark said. We'll have to relocate him. I'm sorry. Shadow let out a soft cry, higher, almost pained, and it broke something inside her. They prepared to leave, but before he walked out, Clark paused at the door. He didn't look at her. He kept his gaze on the snow falling outside. My brother died after a big cat attack, he said quietly. I'm not your enemy, Mrs. Carter. I just don't want to see something happen to you." The words thudded into her chest. When the trucks rumbled away, the silence returned, wider, heavier, crushing. Evelyn knelt by the carrier. Her hands shook as she unlatched the door. Shadow stepped out carefully, leaning into her with surprising gentleness, pressing his forehead against her chest. She closed her eyes, her palm resting between his small shoulder blades. 10 days, she whispered. Just 10 days to change your fate. The weight of the mountain settled in her bones, but so did something else. Something fierce and determined. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt purpose. "We'll find a way, Shadow," she murmured, letting the fire warm them both. "I won't let them take you." Outside, the wind carried another distant cry through the pines. This time, Shadow didn't tremble. He listened. The next morning came harsh and gray, the kind of bleak winter light that made the whole world feel fragile. Evelyn stood at her kitchen window with a cup of tea warming her hands, watching the frost crawl slowly across the glass. 10 days. 10 days to build something she didn't know how to build. 10 days to learn rules she'd never needed. 10 days to keep Shadow safe. The number felt impossible. Shadow paced the length of the living room, stronger today than yesterday, his steps long, shoulders rolling with a grace that didn't belong to any kitten. He was growing. Fast. Too fast. And the clock against him was growing even faster. When she stepped outside to examine the small clearing behind her house, the only space large enough for an enclosure, her breath misted into the frozen air. The ground was uneven. Half the area was covered in tangled roots. The slope leaned downward toward the forest. Not ideal for building anything, much less a secure habitat for a future 120-pound mountain lion. "Well," she whispered, rubbing her aching back, "we don't have the luxury of perfection." She spent the morning clearing snow, chopping dead branches, marking out the borders with old stakes she found in her shed. Her hands throbbed from the cold, but stopping wasn't an option. Every time she thought of Clark's warning, or the lonely sound of the mountain lion calling from the tree line, her resolve hardened. Shadow watched her from the kitchen window, golden eyes tracking every movement. Around noon, her neighbor Harris shuffled over, coat buttoned crooked, hat askew. He squinted at the stakes in the ground. "What exactly are you building there, Evelyn? Looks bigger than a chicken coop." She hesitated. "It's to keep Shadow safe." Harris stared at her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "I don't know what you got yourself into, but folks around here talk. Clark came by earlier, said something about an illegal animal." Evelyn's stomach clenched. "He's not illegal. He's just complicated." Harris scratched his chin. "You need help?" Her eyes widened. "Would you?" He grunted. "Don't look so shocked. My knees are bad, not my heart." Together they worked for hours, dragging old lumber from his shed, measuring the ground, arguing gently about whether the fence posts needed to be 4 feet deep or 5. Harris insisted on deeper. "Mountain lions can dig," he said. "I've lived near these woods 70 years. I know what they can do." By late afternoon, her muscles burned. Her fingers ached. When she finally returned inside to rest, she collapsed into her chair. Shadow padded over immediately. Pressing his forehead against her knee with surprising tenderness, she stroked the back of his head. "We started," she told him, as if he understood. That's something. But her heart still felt heavy. Building an enclosure was more than digging holes and setting posts. She needed steel mesh, reinforced gates, roofing to prevent climbing, a double safety vestibule, a permit, and money. More money than she had tucked into her old savings account or her modest retirement fund, carefully guarded in case she ever needed Medicare supplement insurance or emergency medical care. She could sell her antique dining table, maybe the jewelry she hadn't worn since her husband passed. But it still wouldn't be enough. That night, she sat at the small desk in her bedroom, staring at the login screen of the local community forum. She rarely used the internet except to pay bills. But Rowan's words echoed in her mind. He thinks you're his only safety. With trembling fingers, she began typing. She didn't beg. She didn't dramatize. She simply told the truth. How she'd found a tiny creature by the road. How she'd learned he wasn't a kitten, but something rare and wild. How she'd grown to love him, and how she had 10 days to give him a legal home or lose him forever. She reread it twice, hesitant, embarrassed, afraid of judgment. Then she clicked post. Exhaustion weighed on her bones. She shut down the computer and crawled into bed. Shadow curled beside her, his body warm, breath slow and steady. The rumble in his chest calmed her, even if she knew it wasn't a true purr. It was something deeper, something wild trying to soften itself. By dawn, she didn't expect anything to change. But when she opened her front door the next morning, she froze. A truck she didn't recognize idled in her driveway. The side read, High Timber Lumber Co. A man climbed out, waved, then gestured toward the bed of the truck filled with pressure-treated planks. Delivery for Evelyn Carter, he said cheerfully. Paid in full, anonymous donor. She stared. There must be a mistake. No, ma'am, the man chuckled. You got friends you don't even know about. Before she could respond, another car pulled up. Then a second truck, then a third. Within an hour, half a dozen locals had gathered in her yard. People she'd seen in grocery stores, at church, at the post office. A retired welder. A carpenter who'd once built barns for a living. A teen boy with a box of tools. Even the young barista from the town coffee shop showed up with sandwiches and hot tea. And then, last of all, Deputy Clark arrived. Evelyn stiffened when she saw him step out of the truck, hat low against the cold. But instead of issuing orders or warnings, he grabbed a pair of work gloves from his passenger seat. Your post last night, he said, not meeting her eyes. I read it. You came to shut me down? She asked quietly. No, he answered, clearing his throat. I came to grab a shovel. Shock warmed her chest in a way she hadn't expected. Work began immediately. Men dug holes for the primary fence posts while others assembled the framing. Harris organized the lumber. The welder set up his equipment, sending sparks flying. The carpenter sketched out the double-door entry system required for big cats. Someone brought a portable heater. Someone else set up work lights as the sky darkened. For the first time in years, Evelyn's yard was filled with voices, laughter, the clatter of tools against metal. It felt like a barn raising from another century. Neighbors building something bigger than themselves. Shadow watched from inside the cabin, his eyes bright, tail twitching slowly. He didn't growl, he didn't hide. He simply observed, as though recognizing the energy swelling around him. But just as progress began to feel real, as hope began to push back the fear, Harris suddenly stiffened near the fence line. Everybody stop, he hissed. Silence fell. Fear prickled Evelyn's skin as she followed his gaze. There, at the edge of the darkening woods, stood a large silhouette. Broad shoulders, muscular frame, ears perked, eyes glowing faintly in the dusk. A mountain lion, full grown. It stood utterly still, watching the humans build the enclosure, watching Shadow. Clark stepped forward but didn't reach for his weapon. "Keep calm," he murmured. "Nobody move too fast." The lion let out a low, humming growl, soft but resonant, as if vibrating through the earth. Shadow, inside the cabin, responded with a high, trembling chirp. Evelyn felt her blood turn cold. Everyone stood frozen for what felt like endless minutes, until the lion slowly backed into the forest, disappearing without a sound. Only when the last glimmer of its eyes vanished did Clark exhale shakily. "Well," he muttered, wiping his brow, "we definitely need that enclosure finished." The work resumed with renewed urgency. Fear had transformed into determination. The forest was watching. Time was running out. And Evelyn, standing in the center of it all, realized something deep and fierce. She wasn't just building a cage. She was building a promise. The final morning arrived with a strange stillness, the kind that settles over the mountains before a storm or a revelation. Frost glazed the fence posts of the nearly finished enclosure, making them shimmer in the early light like they had been dipped in glass. Evelyn stood at her back door, her breath rising in pale clouds, hands clasped tight as if holding herself together. Today was the inspection. Today, she would either keep Shadow or lose him forever. Inside the cabin, Shadow paced near the window, tail flicking in restless arcs. He was larger now, far larger than the tiny kitten she had scooped from the storm drain. His shoulders had widened, his stride grown powerful, and his eyes held an alert, wild intelligence that belonged to the mountains more than any hearth. But when he pressed his forehead against her thigh and released that deep, vibrating rumble, she felt the same small creature she'd rescued weeks ago. The same trust, the same need. "It's going to be all right," she whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "I promised I'd fight for you. I meant it." Soon, trucks rumbled up her driveway. The sound felt like thunder. Deputy Clark stepped out first, then two wildlife inspectors she hadn't met before. One carried a clipboard thick with papers. The other wore a stern expression, the kind that made her heart sink. Behind them, Rowan arrived last, offering a small nod of encouragement that steadied her trembling hands. The group walked toward the enclosure, and Evelyn followed, Shadow watching from the window with intense, unblinking focus. The inspectors circled the structure slowly. They measured the fence height, checked the welds, pulled on the roof mesh, examined the digged barriers, tested the locks on the double-entry safety vestibule. Every second felt like a tiny eternity stretching longer and longer, until Evelyn wasn't sure she remembered how to breathe at all. Clark tested one of the gates, letting it swing shut with a heavy clang. "Solid," he murmured. But the older inspector still said nothing. She bent down to examine the lower fencing where Harris had helped pack the dirt. She pushed against the support beams, tugged the latches, inspected the anchoring. Her silence was unbearable. At last, she stood up and turned toward Evelyn. "You built all this in 10 days? Evelyn swallowed. "Not alone. My neighbors, they helped. I didn't expect it. But Shadow, he changed something in people. He changed something in me." The inspector's eyes softened slightly. "This is impressive." Hope flickered painfully in Evelyn's chest. "Is it enough?" "We'll finish the paperwork inside," the inspector said. "Let's talk through the requirements." Inside the cabin, they reviewed safety protocols, feeding procedures, emergency plans. They discussed liability and the responsibilities that came with wildlife custody, topics that reminded Evelyn of the practicality of home insurance and the fragility of aging alone in the mountains. She answered every question with honesty, even when her voice shook. Finally, the lead inspector stamped the final document, with a heavy, echoing thud. Approved. The word hit harder than any snowfall. Evelyn let out a gasp that broke into a trembling laugh. Clark smiled, a real one this time, and Rowan clapped her gently on the shoulder. "You did it," he said. "He's safe." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "He's family." They stepped outside together. Evelyn opened the cabin door, and Shadow walked out slowly, his long tail sweeping the porch. He froze when he saw the enclosure waiting for him. His ears swiveled, his posture alert, but not fearful, almost curious. "Go on, sweetheart," she murmured softly. "It's yours." She walked him through the vestibule, her hand lightly brushing his back as he entered the space she'd poured her heart, strength, and savings into. The moment his paws touched the earth inside, he lifted his head to the sky, letting out a soft chuff, a sound not of fear nor dominance, but something like recognition, something like belonging. He wandered to the climbing logs, then to the reinforced platforms. When he discovered the shaded corner near the cedar stump, exactly where she'd imagined he'd like to nap, his tail curled with contentment. But then, from the trees beyond the fence, a familiar cry echoed through the forest. The call was haunting, low, resonant, a sound that stirred something primal in the air around them. Shadow froze, ears forward, and at the edge of the forest, bathed in the thin winter sunlight, the full-grown mountain lion stepped into view. Her coat shimmered, her posture was powerful but not aggressive. Her eyes, pale amber, held a strange softness as she gazed at Shadow through the mesh. "Is that her?" Evelyn whispered. Rowan nodded slowly. "I'd say yes. That's his mother." Shadow chirped, a high, trembling sound he'd never made before. The mother lion didn't approach the fence aggressively. She simply watched, head tilted slightly, as if assessing the safety of the creature she'd lost. A quiet rumble resonated from her chest, not a warning, but an acknowledgement. Gratitude, perhaps, or farewell. For a long moment, mother and son stood only yards apart, separated by steel and circumstance, but linked by something deeper, something ancient. Then she turned and slipped into the trees, her form fading like smoke among the shadows. Evelyn felt tears slip down her cheeks. She knows he's safe. "Yes," Rowan whispered, "and she trusts you with him." As the sun dipped behind the ridge, Evelyn walked along the fence until she reached the spot where Shadow stood. He rose on his hind legs, placing his paws against the mesh, bringing his forehead level with hers. She pressed her own gently against the cold steel, and he released a deep, rhythmic rumble that vibrated in her chest. A greeting, a promise, a bond neither law nor wilderness could undo. "Come on," she said softly, voice full of warmth. "Let's go check the rest of your new home." Shadow followed her along the fence line, his tail swaying contentedly. Around them, the forest stirred with the night's first sounds, and a breeze swept down from the mountains, carrying the scent of pine and snow. It wasn't the life she'd planned, not even close. But it was a good life, a wild life, a chosen life. And as the last light of day faded into velvet blue, Evelyn knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. And Shadow, the tiny black kitten who had changed everything, chuffed in agreement.